Hi everyone, it's me, Krylios, Team Rayceen Productions co-host and moderator.
Hi, I'm Yilin, Team Rayceen Productions co-host and moderator.
Joining us is Montgomery County District 5 Councilmember Kristin Mink. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here with you.
Welcome, Kristin. So good to have you. Please share with our viewers a little about your background and who you are.
Sure. So I grew up in Montgomery County, first generation Chinese immigrant. I'm actually the first Asian American to sit on the Montgomery County Council. So that's exciting. Yes, thank you. Thank you. It is an honor and a big responsibility. But yeah, I grew up here. I started as a teacher. I taught for a long time, starting in the Montgomery County public school system. I shifted into full-time advocacy and organizing work eventually. And that was what I was doing prior to being elected as a council member.
Wonderful.
Fabulous. That is so wonderful. That is really, really wonderful. Now, let me know what inspired you to run for public office and how would you describe the experience thus far?
That's a big question. And, so that advocacy and organizing work was, my job was to work really hard with the community to try to get our electeds to do the right thing. So, I did that as a volunteer basis on the side, started off as as an activist and then kind of moved into a, policy advocacy and professional organizing role full time. And so, you're working hand in hand with people who are closely impacted by things and trying to get policymakers to change policy based on those needs. And that's very different than being, a lobbyist who can walk in and say, look, I've got millions of dollars and I'm going to convince you to do this or that, for that reason. We have to come and be able to say our people power is so strong that you should be compelled to do this in order to keep your seat. Or, we're going to move your heart and mind such that, we're going to shift you a little bit in this direction. And those two different avenues work better with different people in elected office, as I'm sure you know. But, you've got impacted people who are really putting their blood, sweat, and tears into trying to pass policy that's going to legitimately protect and benefit people. And it gets to you where eventually it's just like, you look around and we've got people who are, being arrested in civil disobedience. You've got people who are like, crying in the offices of elected officials, telling their story. And you're like, if any one of these people was sitting in the seat, we would be in a better position. And then an opportunity presented itself in Montgomery County where there were a lot of empty seats at one time. And it was like, how many of these can we take? And so it was a very quick decision actually to decide to run. The turnaround time was, I don't know, a few weeks, maybe a couple months. It was a quick decision. It was not something that I'd ever imagined myself doing. But we went for it, and I was not the establishment candidate by any stretch. And even a lot of the groups that I had organized with, there were things at play. There's some dynamics at play, and I get it. But ultimately, we had people power, and even though my leaflets weren't covered with endorsements, we had people from all across the district and all across the community who were very, very engaged, and we're excited about it. We did all small dollar donations, public financing. There was like a non-public finance, like big money candidate also in the race. And that's how we won, by a large margin, actually. And so now it's an opportunity to continue working and engaging with impacted people, with community members, with community groups, and try to put those values into action as much as possible.
So inspiring.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that really interesting pathway to becoming a council member, and the focus on people power and engaging with the community. So how would you describe, Kristin, the community feedback you receive, and how has being a council member impacted your personal life?
Oh, it's interesting. I did so much work engaging with the community beforehand, but obviously the dynamics are real different when I sit in what is now like a seat of power. And so it certainly gives me more avenues to connect with even more members of the community, and I'm able, I'm with neighborhood groups a lot. We have constituent meetings. There's all these different nonprofits, and many of them I had worked with before, and many of them are brand new to me, and they're working with folks who are impacted by particular situations. And so there's a lot more avenues to be able to engage, which means it's very hard to prioritize personal time, because there's always another meeting that can be had or attended, and those have so much value in helping to direct my time and my actions. What's going to be the most useful? How can this group be supported or helped? And what connections should I help to forge? And all of these things. So you're asking about personal life, and that that was hard. Also, when I was working as an organizer and advocate, when it's just you're very engaged in the work, it can be hard to separate and to make time. But my husband is amazing. Luckily, he's always been incredibly supportive of my work. I have 2 little kids, and so trying to balance and make sure that I have time for them, and also that they're kind of getting a window into and understanding what I do and why as well. So I'm still learning how to what the right balance is there, and then there's things like I've received threats, and I knew as a woman of color running for office, it's like one of the things that you think about is that might happen, and that is likely to happen. And I've received threats actually in the past before in advocacy. I was in a viral video, and that resulted in a lot of threats. So I had kind of been through that before. So at least I was able to say, like, can I deal with kind of, the worst case scenario of what that looks like? But, we got some of that during the campaign. I've gotten some of that in office. And that's something I really want to shield my family from also. And I want to be able to try to separate from my personal life as much as possible. But that part's hard, but manageable, making it work.
Certainly. And this being elected for this role in itself is a huge accomplishment, but talk to me about some of those accomplishments that you have already, achieved since you've been in this role as council member that you are most proud of.
Well, I'm really proud of I really wanted to kind of put into play like ethical policymaking and community-based policymaking, and just trying to figure out the particulars of like, well, what does that really look like structurally? And I'm still learning. I'm for sure still learning. This is not perfection over here. But I do believe that policy should be generated from the people who are impacted. Like, that's the starting point. And if you have a good feedback loop, you're going to end up with, and there's a lot of stakeholders, obviously, but if you have those strong feedback loops, you're going to end up with a stronger bill at the end than if I was just sitting here in my office being like, what seems like a good idea? Like, let's talk to a lawyer about it. That's not where you're going to come up with, hear about all of the different like loopholes that could be involved, all different ideas about how to make a piece of legislation even stronger, or ways that issues are tied together, or the way that different intersectionalities are impacted, and maybe that should influence the bill in some particular way. And so all of these different things, that when you have a lot of stakeholders and when you have a lot of people who care about this issue, if the ideas start with them, and then if you have an ongoing feedback loop, then I think you're going to end up with the stronger policy. And I often, in my advocacy and organizing work, I saw that a lot, because the bill draft might come out, and we'd be looking it over and just be like, if they had just asked us, we could have fixed this on the front end, and now we have to go and try to advocate for this fix. And so I really want to do my best. It's never going to be perfect, and there's always people who, gosh, I wish I had talked to them at the beginning. There's always going to be that, but I've been doing my best to try to draft in that way and try to choose priorities in that way. And I'm really proud of that. We just passed a really big bill that was really rooted in that. And so seeing that whole process kind of come to fruition in a moment where then a lot of those stakeholders, impacted people who were part of that process, are in the room, to celebrate, felt really amazing.
That's wonderful. And so speaking of really large bills that pass, this is a great segue. Housing and rent are concerns in many communities, including Montgomery County. How do you think that should be addressed?
So that was the big bill that we passed actually last night. We were here all day haggling over amendments and finally got that bill passed. Most of the amendment votes were split votes. The final vote on the bill was a split vote. We've got 11 members of the council. It was many of the amendment votes were 6-5. The final vote for the bill was 7-4. So this was a hard fought bill. And, I was really honored to have co-sponsored, co-written, co-introduced the HOME Act. You can see an advocate holding up a sign that says the HOME Act there, Bill 1623, with Councilmember Will Jawando. We also worked on it closely with County Executive Mark Elrich, who did rent stabilization in Tacoma Park, Maryland, and municipality there. And he cares a lot about this as well. So he worked with us closely. But then we worked with groups who work with tenants. We talked to small landlords, ethical landlords, nonprofit developers. But throughout the process, we really wanted to make sure that as we're, if we're trying to keep people housed, like what are really the issues? What can they really afford? What are the loopholes that landlords are using? Both here in Montgomery County and in other jurisdictions where they have passed different rent regulations, like how has it been playing out? Obviously, we looked at research. We have a lot of lessons to learn from other jurisdictions and over many decades who have passed rent regulations. So there's often a lot of fear about whether development is going to continue, whether housing will continue to be built, because that's part of our housing solution. Also, we're not going to be able to just keep people in their homes, renters and homeowners, and have that be the solution. The population is growing, the need is very great, we already don't have enough. So building is also part of the solution. And there's often a lot of fear that if you regulate rents in any kind of way, well, the building is going to stop. Well, luckily, the research, you're still going to hear that. Anybody who tries to pass this bill, you're still going to hear a lot of fear mongering about that. But the research tells us very clearly that we can absolutely pass rent stabilization and the building will continue. So, and we know how to write good policy now. We know the different policy pieces. You need to exempt new construction for, a period of years so they can pay back their lenders and so on. But it's certainly doable and you can always go back and adjust, But what's not acceptable is just not having any kind of policy in place and just allowing the evictions to continue, allowing the struggles to continue. We have people who are struggling to pay for medication, who, and to pay for food. And those are often the examples that are given, but we should also care about the people who reliably have their food and medication, but maybe they can't send their kid to camp, maybe that kid's, shoes are falling apart. Maybe, they can't go out to lunch once in a while, with people deserve to live, to have quality of life.
Yeah, certainly.
So the metric also cannot just be where is the is food getting to mouths? That's really important. We already know that we're not meeting that bar, but we also, I think, we have to have the respect to respect the humanity of people as well, and we just have to be careful not to always be saying this is the only box that needs to be checked. That's actually not acceptable. That cannot be our long-term goal here. That can't be our short-term goal. So anyway, we want to make sure that we are regulating rents as much as possible while still ensuring that the building is going to continue, that landlords still get a fair return on their investment. But let's be real about that. We want to keep rents as low as possible and keep our housing market as affordable as possible while still making sure those things are happening. And we got, the bill that we ultimately passed was a compromise bill. And so it could have been better. And I looked at the research. I think that it could have been better and the development would have continued, but I'm happy with where we landed. And it was a really interesting the way it played out because we introduced the HOME Act and then right as we were getting ready to introduce it, suddenly another bill popped up, a competing bill also on rent gouging popped up. That was clearly going to be in competition with our bill that set the cap at our bill set, the Home Act set it at 3% at inflation or 3%, whichever was lower, and the other bill set it at inflation plus 8% with no cap. And then, the exemptions, and there were other differences, and that bill was introduced with majority of the council's name already on it. So just to frame the fight, to end up at a bill that reflected a lot of the policy priorities that we had in the Home Act, and even then, and then we added some also on top of that, to end up there really reflects on the people power that was behind our movement to get this done. So it was a huge success, and it really shows that when you are engaging with the community and doing something that they really need and want, and engaging them in the process and making sure it reflects them, they're going to show up, and we can really get stuff done and overcome what may seem like insurmountable hurdles at the start.
Wow, wow, wow. Well, I used to live in Montgomery County for 5 years after college, so it has a special place in my heart. Such a beautiful place, wonderful place, so diverse, different people from all over, and, just a wonderful place. Tell me briefly, what other issues are you looking forward to addressing as council member?
I mean, there's a lot of them, but I'll mention that really on my mind right now is the school budget for our public schools here. They're underfunded right now, and the budget that we just passed, it was not sufficient. It was 70% of what they requested on top of last year's, and they're struggling, and so a lot of what's remaining is actually riding on federal grant money that's going to expire in a year. So, I mean, stuff like social workers, like important stuff that we definitely want to keep paying for. It's just going to go away in a year if we don't do something about it. And so working to engage the community now on what the needs are that we want to see in our school system, and doing the organizing for that in preparation for the next budget cycle. That's a big one. Reimagining public safety work in that field. I also sit on the public safety committee. So working to, civilianize where we can, looking to build up our, our civilian response teams, and improve how we deal with mental health situations. So there's a lot, but those are a couple that I'll mention.
Thank you, Kristin. There's clearly so much to discuss and learn and also work on. So please tell our viewers how they can learn more about you and what you are doing.
Sure. So my social media handles are at CM Kristin Mink, KRISTINMINK. And I'll have some stuff up there about rent stabilization. I really hope some of the pieces of our bill can help become, to drive stronger rent policy in our surrounding jurisdictions, and that we'll be able to then, if they can build on us, then we can come back in a few years and improve ours, and really, and we can really make some big strides in that area. But would love to keep in touch with viewers. Feel free to reach out to me on social media there at CM Kristin Mink or at my office. And especially if you're in Montgomery County, we really want to hear what the needs are out there, and how we can help tap into that, especially legislatively.
Certainly. And to our viewers, please look in the description below for those links, okay? Councilmember Mink, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been such a pleasure getting to chat with you. Thank you for the work that you're doing in Montgomery County, and we wish you the best of luck as you continue this journey. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. To those watching, please follow Team Rayceen on social media.
And click around our YouTube channel and check out our other interviews, vlogs, forums, and more. And while you're at it, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. But most of all, thank you for watching.